3 billion Swiss francs. That is what Credit Suisse sold for in March 2023. A bank 167 years old folded into UBS over a single weekend before the Monday markets could open. The headlines named the wounded. Saudi National Bank had reported losses of more than $1 billion. The Qatar Investment Authority was named in every wire story. But the number 3 name on the shareholder register, a Saudi family group holding about 3% of the bank, released no statement. It gave no interview. Not one sentence. For most investors, that silence would be shock. For this family, it was policy, and it had been policy since 1947. Stoppons. This is the story of the Olayan group and of Suleiman Olayan, the orphan who decided that the strongest empire is the one nobody can see. Business history, as it is usually told, is loud. Towers with names on them, founders on magazine covers. The Olayan group is the counter-argument. One of the largest family businesses in the Arab world and one of the least examined. Nobody deleted this chapter with a court order or a fire. It was engineered never to be written. And that engineering is the story. Turned. In 2025, its revenue was roughly $9.5 billion, spread across more than 40 companies. Distribution, food, insurance, financial investments. Forbes ranked it for years as the foremost family business in the Arab world. And its headquarters is not in Riyadh. It sits in Vaduz, Liechtenstein, an alpine principality better known for discretion than for oil. By the end of this chapter, you will know how an orphan with no capital and no family name made himself indispensable to the company that became Saudi Aramco, and how he converted that dependence, contract by contract, into ownership, utilities, insurance, distribution, and finally, a seat among the largest shareholders of one of Europe's oldest banks. We have to start in Unayzah, a merchant town in central Saudi Arabia. Suleiman Saleh Olayan was born there on November 5th, 1918, into a trading family and into loss. His mother died months after his birth. His father died while he was still a child. By 6, he was an orphan. The relatives who raised him made a decision that would quietly shape a century of Gulf business. They sent the boy across the water to Bahrain, to school. First the Al Khalifa and Al Jafariya schools, then an American missionary school, where he learned English. Remember that detail. In the Gulf of the 1930s, oil was arriving, and it spoke English. In 1936, at 17, he took his first job with the Bahrain Petroleum Company. A year later, he crossed to the Saudi mainland and joined the California Arabian Standard Oil Company, the American venture that would become Aramco. He stayed for a decade, from 1937 to 1947, and he climbed transportation dispatcher, storehouse supervisor, then government relations, the exact seam where American oilmen met the Saudi state. In 1947, King Abdulaziz Al Saud visited Aramco. The man standing between the king and the Americans, translating, was the orphan from Unayzah. Olayan later called Aramco his university, his own word preserved in the company's official history. That summer, he graduated. He took out a personal loan secured on his own home and founded the General Contracting Company, Trucks and Supply. A man with no inheritance bet the roof over his head. His first customer was Bechtel, the American engineering giant, then building the trans-Arabian pipeline, TAPline, to carry Saudi crude toward the Mediterranean. Aramco needed everything moved, Olayan moved it. If the architecture of this fortune is starting to come into focus, subscribe. There is a missing chapter like this every week on this channel. Here is the conflict at the center of this story, and it is not a lawsuit. It is a war against the default fate of middlemen. Contractors get used, then replaced. Olayan's answer was to stop being a supplier and become infrastructure. In 1950, he founded the National Gas Company, which became Saudi Arabia's first public utility. In 1954, Arab Commercial Enterprises, the firm that became the largest insurance brokerage in the Middle East, its clients, everyone in the Gulf who suddenly had something to lose. Follow the sequence. The man hauling the oil boom's cargo now sold it power and insured its risk. In 1956, his company became the exclusive Saudi distributor for Cummins engines, Kenworth trucks, and Atlas Copco compressors. Then came Kimberly-Clark, General Foods, Pillsbury, Hunt Wesson. A kingdom was being built from imported machinery, and an ever-growing share of it arrived with Olayan paperwork attached. Then came the turn that separates a rich contractor from a dynasty. Olayan stopped merely servicing other people's assets and started owning them. The service contracts threw off cash. The cash bought equity in utilities, in insurance, in distribution, and then in Western companies themselves. By 1983, his estimated net worth was $2 billion. Alongside the buying ran a second strategy, the one this channel exists to examine. Invisibility. No towers with the family name, no interviews of consequence. Through decades, when Gulf wealth grew loud, palaces, airlines, trophy towers, the Olayans bought quietly and said nothing. And, eventually, a headquarters in Vaduz, Liechtenstein, once. Why would a Saudi empire, built on Saudi oil money, base itself in a tiny Alpine principality? Because Liechtenstein sells the one commodity this family prized above all others: privacy. The group's own official history records every milestone you have just heard. 1947, 1950, 1954, 1956. What it does not record is noise. There is almost none to record. Suleiman Olayan died on July 4th, 2002 at 83 after a 55-year run as an independent businessman. Forbes put his fortune that year at $7.6 billion. The succession was conventional and quiet, like everything else. His son Khaled took the chairman's seat. His daughters took board seats beside him. One of them stepped further into the light than the family had ever allowed. Lubna Olayan, trained in America, an agriculture degree from Cornell, an MBA from Indiana University. She worked at Morgan Guaranty Trust in New York from 1979 to 1981, then came home to the family firm. She ran the group's Saudi arm as chief executive until May 1st, 2019. In June 2019, she became the first Saudi woman to head a bank. Her board seats ran from Cornell to the MIT Corporation to the World Economic Forum. Jonathan Franklin succeeded her as chief executive. She stayed on the board. On December 29th, 2025, she was appointed chair of Saudi Awwal Bank, a term running from the start of 2026 through 2028. The most private family in Saudi business had produced one of the most visible women in Saudi finance. The empire could afford exactly one face. Then there is Zurich, the official history, the version the family wrote and published itself, ends in escalation, milestone after milestone. The shareholder register of Credit Suisse holds the chapter that version leaves out. By the 2020s, the Olayan Group was the number 3 shareholder of Credit Suisse, a bank founded in 1856, holding about 3%. Gulf investors together controlled roughly 20%, Saudi National Bank with about 10%, the Qatar Investment Authority, and Olayan. It was the kind of position empires boast about. The Olayans never mentioned it. In March 2023, after days of panic, Credit Suisse was sold to UBS for 3 billion Swiss francs, a fraction of what it had recently been worth. Every shareholder was written down. Saudi National Bank reported losses of more than $1 billion and said so publicly. Qatar's fund was named in every dispatch. So what did the Olayan Group lose that weekend? No figure was ever published. The family has never publicly commented. Not that week, not since. The official story, in other words, is that there is no story. The register in Zurich says otherwise. Today the group runs on exactly as designed. A professional chief executive, Hani Laskani, manages it. The board reads Khaled, Hutham, and Lubna Olayan. Revenue for 2025, roughly $9.5 billion across more than 40 companies, with offices from New York to London to Singapore. The headquarters is still Vaduz. 3 billion Swiss francs. That is what it cost to watch 167 years of Swiss banking vanish in a weekend. And the family with the third largest stake never said a word. Every other empire in these archives fought to be seen. This one spent nearly 8 decades fighting not to be. Which defense holds longer, the podium or the silence? The comments are open. The rest of the business stories someone tried to keep quiet are waiting at deleted